Okay, so hello. My name is Theresa Ritz. I'm a licensed mental health counselor and a master certified addictions professional from Clearwater, Florida. I am co-owner of a psychotherapy practice called MindWorks, and I do outpatient counseling.
Great. Well, we're so happy that you could be with us, Teresa, and we appreciate you taking the time today. So what I'm going to do is just kind of run through some questions. But if you want to get started by telling us a little bit about why you chose to pursue a degree in counseling, that would be great.
Okay, so I've always wanted to be a counselor. From the time I was 15. And that was my goal. And somehow I ended up in law school. I'm not sure how that. So I went to law school at WVU, graduated in 1991, and did 18 years owning a real estate title company. All that time, I kept thinking I should have been a therapist. I should have been a therapist. So I got a little tired of doing the real estate thing and decided that I was going to go back and get a master's. And it was a really quick decision. I happened to be driving by an area in Wheeling where I was living, Wheeling, West Virginia, and there was a sign that said Master's, WVU Master's Program Fair or something. And I thought, well, I'm going to go into social work. Went in there. The social work line was too long, and there was a rehab counselor stand, and Carolyn Holly was sitting there, and there was nobody in that line. So I thought, well, it's still counseling. I'll go talk to her. And so
Hmm.
that's
Well, that's good. That's by chance, but everything seems to have worked itself out pretty nicely. So that's great.
it was a fabulous program. I was so happy with it.
Same here. So can you tell me both about your current job, of course, but maybe a little bit about your background and work in general and what led you to your current job as well?
So I'll just kind of go through the jobs I've had since I graduated. Graduated in 2008, and my internship was at Office of Vocational Rehabilitation in Washington, Pennsylvania. And they hired me after I finished my internship, and I was a specialist for persons with addiction.
Hmm.
And because I already had a CAC when I started my master's program. So I worked with that population, and I really enjoyed that job. I was there a couple of years, and then for one reason or another, ended up moving to Florida. And when I came to Florida, I initially worked in a residential treatment program for people with chemical dependency.
Hmm.
I worked there for a while, and then worked at left that agency and went to a second agency and worked residential treatment for substance abuse. Again, I think I was there about 2.5 years. And then I went and worked as a program director for a residential program in St. Pete Beach, Florida, for treatment for people with chemical dependency. And I was there kind of on and off, wore a lot of different hats for that company. And I started in 2013, and I stopped working for them in 2016. I did I did program supervision, clinical direction. I also did a lot of licensing, and they owned facilities in California as well. And I went out there and got them CARF certification and Joint Commission certifications for some of their programs, and licensed a couple of new programs in California for them. And oversaw some of the surveys that went on in their Florida facilities here. Oh, I also opened a program in St. Augustine for them. While I was working for them, I was recruited to work for community mental health here. There's a large hospital corporation called Baycare, and they own, I don't know, 15 or 16 hospitals. And they had a behavioral health unit that needed an outpatient counselor with a specialist in substance abuse. So I was hired by them and ran an IOP and a women's trauma group, and did some individual counseling as well. And I was with them for a year. I left there and went to work for an agency that does work with kids, Medicaid kids primarily, who've been removed from their homes, and they do some specialized foster care and therapeutic case management, wraparound services for kids, in other words. And I was the quality assurance manager there. and they had 5 offices in Florida. So I traveled around to each office, you know, auditing charts, training staff in proper documentation, making sure they were in compliance. And I was the liaison whenever they had a licensure survey for DCF or ACA, or any of the insurance companies that might want to come in and do an audit.
Mm-hmm.
And so I was there for a couple of years. And during that time, I also started a private practice, and I was doing a part-time private practice. That got full very quickly, and I really enjoyed it. So I decided I would go into private practice full time, which I did about 2.5 years ago. And then last year, I joined, my wife and I decided we would open a practice together. So that is MindWorks. And here I specialize in, I don't do as much substance abuse as I used to. I primarily do trauma, and I'm certified in accelerated resolution therapy, and I also do EMDR. And I have a women's trauma group, and you know, I see individuals. I also see adolescents. I get referrals from the Department of Juvenile Justice, and I have adolescents who come, and I have to do an assessment for substance abuse, and usually some outpatient counseling with them. So somehow I'm now seeing adolescents in my practice. It's sort of a surprise because I didn't even like my own kids when they were teenagers.
I think a lot of people could understand that. Could you speak a little bit more about EMDR and the other specialization that you have and what those kind of look like or what those are?
Okay, EMDR is based on bilateral stimulation of the brain. It's eye movement desensitization, reprogramming, or restructuring. I can't remember. And it is based on eye movement. And Francine Shapiro, I believe, is the person who came up with this a number of years ago. And it really works very well. And I've used it. I trained in that while I was still in Pennsylvania. But down here, it's sort of EMDR on steroids. Accelerated resolution therapy is similar. It uses eye movement, but it also does positive image replacement. So while the limbic system is open from the eye movements, you help the client to replace some of the troubling images with more positive images. And it's excellent. The woman who developed that is Laney Rosenwitz, and she's a therapist up in Connecticut. She got a $500,000 grant to do testing on this. It was supposed to be for returning combat vets. And so she brought it down here to USF because we have a large VA population in this area, and there's a large VA facility called Bay Pines. So all the evidence-based work was done down here in Tampa. And so a lot of us around here had an opportunity to train, and we're using it now. It's not just returning combat vets, it's used for all kinds of trauma. And it also works. I've used it for a few phobias. So I had someone who had germophobia, and it worked very well for that.
Interesting.
And it also works well for anxiety.
Okay, great. Thank you for explaining that a little bit further for everybody. Okay, so I think we've kind of covered your agency specifically, but can you kind of give a little bit of a description of what your typical day might look like? So how many clients you might see in an average day, how much of your day is made up of case management type work, documentation, things of that nature. Just kind of walk us through what a day might look like.
I try to see 6 clients a day.
Okay.
And so I usually start about 10 and go into the evening because a lot of people want appointments after their work hours. Appointments are generally 50 minutes. And so a lot of times I only have 50 minutes between clients, you know, to do the documentation. We also do our own billing. We use an electronic health record that is pretty comprehensive, and we can just click a button and send a claim to the insurance company. We also, I do the follow-up as far as calling the insurance companies to find out, you know, about denials and that kind of thing. So if I have a break between clients, I'll do some billing work. Documentation is easy with the EHR. You know, it doesn't take very long to type in a note. And that, I think, is really a time saver. I would recommend everyone do it, and it's HIPAA compliant. And when I first started my practice, I was just using you know, Word docs and Excel spreadsheets, and this has just saved a ton of time. It's very organized. And And so, the day is sometimes long. There's phone calls. There may be calls from clients' families. When I'm doing my trauma group, which is on Tuesday nights, that runs from 6:45 to 8 o'clock.
Hmm.
So sometimes I'll see the clients from that group individually prior to the group. And I have a little dog now that I bring with me to work, and he's just a puppy. He's only 9 months old.
Hmm.
So he kind of sits under my desk. And he has had some training. He's going to train as a therapy dog when he's a year old.
Oh, okay.
So, but he's still kind of shy and afraid of people. He needs therapy. So he kind of hangs out under the desk. But when the bell rings, we have a bell on our door, he will go down the hallway to greet people.
Oh, okay. That's a nice greeting. Great. So how many years did you say you've been in private practice now?
About 2.5.
2.5.
The other thing is that I work 4 days a week,
Okay.
which is really nice. I'm also, I forgot to mention, I'm training in psychodrama. I have 1.5 years of training under my belt for psychodrama. So I use that in my practice a lot. And I go to monthly all-day trainings for that.
Okay. And what is your current caseload, and what type of numbers do you kind of prefer to keep in private practice?
I couldn't tell you how many clients I have in my case because they see me at different intervals.
Okay.
Some are weekly, some are every 2 weeks, and some are just checking in like kind of monthly. But I try to see, maybe 20, 22 people a week.
Okay. Okay, so kind of moving on, could you talk about what you like most about your job?
I'm watching people get better. It's very rewarding. I also like the flexibility.
Sure, yeah. What are some less positive aspects about your job?
Insurance companies.
I figured that would be the answer. Yes.
And consulting what they want to pay me.
Right. How do you feel that the counseling degree prepared you for work in private practice?
I think that I was well prepared in terms of, first of all, documentation. We learned a lot about documentation in our program, and I appreciated that a lot. Also prepared in terms of, the disability factor, because sometimes mental health problems are a result of physical disabilities. And I don't know that without the rehab counseling training, I would have been totally aware of that. I have a lot of clients, like, for example, with fibromyalgia, that really affects their mental health. And I would not have known about that if it hadn't been for rehab counseling. And, we had an abnormal psych course, which prepared me too.
Yeah, there's certainly a lot of overlap, and I don't know that people always fully understand that until they get out there working in the field and really get to see it with their client populations. So it's good to hear that actually is useful later on. What types of additional training, certification, and licensure did you work towards after graduation?
Okay, I think I've mentioned that a little bit,
Yeah.
but I had a CAC, and when I came to Florida, I had to retake that test. And because I have a master's degree, I got the master's level certified addiction professional certification. And then I've had the training. I try to take as many trainings as possible. As I mentioned, I'm doing the psychodrama training. I did the accelerated resolution therapy training. I've taken a lot of training in trauma and treating trauma and attachment disorders.
And are you licensed an LPC as well?
Oh, yeah, I'm a licensed mental health counselor.
Okay. Can you talk a little bit about what that process looked like, since we've got students from different states? Sometimes it can be a little bit different, and so we try to make our students aware of the differences that might exist when going through the licensure process. So if you can speak about that a little bit, that'd be great.
Well, I had passed the CRC exam, so that qualified me when I had the supervision hours to get an LPC in Pennsylvania, which I received just before I moved to Florida. And then when I moved to Florida, I applied for my license here. Florida doesn't make it easy for any professionals to get a license. So they would not accept the CRC exam. So I had to take their licensure exam. But I also had to take a class in, well, there were several: domestic violence, HIV, the Florida laws and rules, which is an ethics course that isn't any different than any other ethics course. And I'm trying to think, medical errors. So I had to earn, I did those online, and I had to earn hours towards those. They also require a human sexuality class, and somehow I argued that the family counseling class and a few other things covered that, which, I was kind of surprised that they took it, but they did. And then I had to sit for the exam. And the exam was very heavy on the mental health, clinical diagnosis. And I didn't feel real competent in that, so I had to do a lot of extra studying. And the exam is really tough.
And that was a Florida-based exam, or was that the NCE?
Yeah, it's the NCE.
The NCE, okay, just making sure. Yeah, that's that sounds like a lot of additional work that would have had to have been done. So I can imagine it took some time as well.
It took about a year.
Yeah. All right. Well, that kind of leads into the next question. Are you involved in any professional organizations, and what are they?
Only NADAC.
Okay.
That's the only one.
Okay. And what does that stand for those that might not know?
Oh gosh. It's the National Association of Alcohol and Drug Addiction Counselors.
Yeah. Okay. Can you describe an ethical dilemma that you have addressed in your work?
I think for me, one of the main ethical dilemmas is whether or not I want to treat someone who has an inability to pay. Because I have an obligation to my practice to bring in money and support the practice. And yet, I have this desire to help people even when they can't pay. So there's always that balance, and sliding scales. And you give someone a sliding scale and they drive in a very expensive car and they've had their nails done, and you kind of think, wait a minute, So that's I think the financial aspect is probably the biggest ethical dilemma that I've had.
Yeah. Are there any specific laws that you have to be knowledgeable about in your day-to-day activities?
Primarily, it would be HIPAA, and then the ethics requirements as a licensed mental health counselor. You have on your PowerPoint ADA and ACA. And ADA, we're a small agency. There's only two of us, so we're not really under that, but we make sure that we are wheelchair accessible, and we're on one level. There aren't very many stairs in many buildings in Florida, so we don't have to worry too much about that. We just want to make sure that everyone can get into the office, so we do have that.
Okay. And you may or may not know, I guess, but are there any Florida specific laws that apply to the work that you guys are doing in private practice?
Not particularly, not at this level.
Okay. Okay, moving right along. Can you describe the relationship you have with other professionals, whether that be other medical professionals or allied health professionals, or any members of like an interdisciplinary treatment team, or any other agency that you might kind of typically work with or refer to?
Well, we network a lot with other professionals. We belong to a Tampa Bay Behavioral Health Network, which is just a group of professionals in the mental health field who get together quarterly, and somebody presents a presentation and we kind of share news and information. But we get a lot of referrals from medical professionals, doctors for treatment, and also from psychiatrists. And we do a lot of marketing to them. And then Baycare, as I said, was the big hospital facility. They asked us to come. They had recently had a style show for female doctors, and they asked us to come. It was really kind of a nice event. and we were able to present what we offer in our practice.
Oh, okay.
And then there are several marketing people for residential treatment programs within Florida who come and visit us from time to time, and we refer. One of them is a detox, and we refer clients there when they need detoxed.
Hmm.
And then another one is a residential facility that treats eating disorders as well as substance abuse, and we have referred clients there.
Hmm. Okay. Have you, and this might be a simple yes or no question, have you in the past or either now been involved in any kind of research related to the field of rehab counseling, mental health counseling, addictions, kind of broadly? Have you ever been involved in any kind of research?
No.
Okay. All right, and so just kind of rounding it out here. In terms of culture and diversity, what groups of individuals have you worked with, and how do you think your degree prepared you to work with these individuals?
I think that the culture and diversity course that I had has been really valuable.
Okay.
And I have had pretty much, you name it, I've had those individuals in my practice, socioeconomic levels, different racial, different religious. I'm currently treating someone who's a Muslim and has experienced, some derogatory and discriminatory things.
Mm-hmm.
Some folks that were just refugees from Vietnam. So, always having an awareness of cultural groups. I also do a lot of LGBT work and have some transgender clients.
And how do you, certainly the last question, but not the least question, the least important, how do you view yourself as an advocate in the profession, and what type of advocacy activities do you involve yourself with, either kind of directly related to the practice or outside of it?
I don't have a lot of time to do a lot of that stuff, although I
Mm-hmm.
would love to do. So it's pretty casual. I don't do any formal advocacy.
Mm-hmm. Okay. And if there's anything else, Theresa, we really appreciate your time today and talking with us. And I think it's beneficial for students to get an idea of where individuals are working and how our careers can lead us to where we end up. Those unique pathways are always good for everybody to hear about. Is there anything else you'd like to mention?
No, I don't think so, except that, it was a fabulous program. And it's interesting because they have a rehab counseling program here at USF. And I don't think it meets the standards of what we were.
I'll say I'm glad to hear that. Well, thank you again, and we really appreciate it.
You're welcome. Have a great day.
You too.